The galaxy had known peace for 12,000 years. At least, that was what the rulers told themselves. The truth was darker. The truth was written in blood and silence. Three great empires controlled the Orion arm of the Milky Way. The Vexari Dominion came first. They were tall creatures covered in green scales, with yellow eyes that could see in complete darkness. Their ancestors had crawled from swamps millions of years ago. Now they commanded fleets of warships and ruled over 200 star systems. The second empire was the Cathari Swarm. They were insected beings with hard black shells and multiple limbs. Each Cathari was connected to the others through a mental link. When one of them learned something, all of them knew it within hours. They did not think like individuals. They thought like one giant mind spread across 1,000 worlds. The third empire was the Luminara Collective. These beings were made of living crystal. Light passed through their bodies and came out as rainbow colors. They were the oldest of the three empires. They remembered times before the others had even learned to make fire. Together, these three empires formed the Galactic Triumvirate. They had signed treaties and made promises. They shared technology and trade. On the surface, everything looked peaceful and good. But the Triumvirate had a secret. A terrible secret that they kept hidden from the younger species of the galaxy. It was called the Culling Protocol. Long ago, the three empires had agreed on one simple rule. Any new species that developed technology was dangerous. Young species were aggressive. They fought wars. They built weapons. If left alone, they would eventually become threats to the established order. The solution was simple and cruel. Find them early, study them quietly, and if they seemed dangerous, erase them completely. Over 12,000 years, the Triumvirate had destroyed 47 species. Some had just discovered fire. Others had built their first cities. A few had even launched primitive rockets into space. None of them survived. The Triumvirate told themselves it was necessary. They said it was for the greater good. They claimed they were protecting the galaxy from chaos and war, but deep down they knew the truth. They were afraid. They were afraid of losing their power. They were afraid of species that might one day challenge them. 300 years before our story begins, a Vexari listening station detected something unusual. Radio signals were coming from a small yellow star at the edge of explored space. The signals were primitive and weak, but they were clearly artificial. Someone was out there. The Triumvirate sent a scout ship to investigate. It took 2 years to reach the source of the signals. What the scouts found was a small blue planet, third from its star. The planet was covered in water and green land, and it was full of life. The dominant species called themselves humans. The scouts watched from orbit for 6 months. They studied human television broadcasts and radio communications. They learned human languages and observed human behavior. When they finally sent their report back to the Triumvirate, it contained a single recommendation: immediate extermination. The report described humans as extremely dangerous. They were aggressive and violent. They had fought countless wars against each other throughout their history. They had weapons that could destroy entire cities in seconds. They were divided into hostile nations that constantly threatened each other. But what scared the Triumvirate most was something else. The humans learned fast, too fast. In just a few hundred years, they had gone from riding horses to flying aircraft. They had split the atom and walked on their own moon. At this rate, they would develop faster than light travel within a century. The Triumvirate did not wait. They assembled a fleet of 50 warships. These were not scout vessels. These were planet killers. Each ship carried enough firepower to turn a world into dust. Fleet Commander Zelvox of the Vexari Dominion led the mission. He was old and experienced. He had participated in 3 previous cullings. He expected this one to be easy. The humans had no space fleet. They had no energy shields. They had no idea that aliens even existed. The fleet arrived in the Sol system on a cold morning in human winter. They positioned themselves behind the planet humans called Mars. From there, they would launch their attack. The plan was simple. First, destroy all human satellites. Second, disable all communications. Third, bombard the major population centers from orbit. The whole thing would take less than 6 hours. Zelvox gave the order to begin. That was when everything went wrong. The human military had been tracking unusual objects entering their solar system for weeks. They did not know what the objects were, but they knew they were not natural. Every nation on Earth had been quietly preparing. Old enemies shared information. Secret weapons were moved into position. The whole planet held its breath and waited. When the alien fleet moved toward Earth, the humans were ready. Nuclear missiles launched from hidden silos across the planet. They were not aimed at the alien ships directly. Humans knew their primitive weapons could not penetrate alien shields. Instead, the missiles detonated in patterns, creating massive electromagnetic pulses that disrupted alien sensors. In the confusion that followed, something unexpected happened. Small human spacecraft hidden on the dark side of the moon launched a desperate attack. They were not military vessels. They were modified mining ships and research stations, armed with whatever weapons humans could attach to them. The attack should have failed. The alien ships were far superior, but the humans did not fight like any species the Triumvirate had ever encountered. They were reckless. They were unpredictable. They crashed their own ships into alien vessels. They sacrificed themselves without hesitation. And somehow, impossibly, they captured one of the alien warships. Fleet Commander Zelvox watched in disbelief as humans boarded his vessel. He had expected primitive savages. Instead, he found soldiers who adapted to alien technology within minutes. They learned how to use alien weapons by watching his own crew. They figured out alien door controls by trial and error. They moved through his ship like water through cracks in stone. Zelvox sent a final message to the Triumvirate before he died. It contained only 4 words. "We made a mistake." The Triumvirate sent a second fleet, larger, better prepared. It also failed. The third fleet met the same fate. By then, the humans had learned to use alien faster-than-light drives. They had reverse-engineered alien weapons. They had taken 12,000 years of technological advancement and made it their own in less than a decade. The Triumvirate made a decision. They declared the Sol system forbidden space. They erased all records of Earth from their databases. They told no one what had happened. The 3 failed fleets were listed as lost to natural disasters. The humans were left alone, forgotten, and assumed to be contained on their single world. It was the greatest mistake in galactic history. Nexus Station floated in the heart of triumvirate space like a jewel among the stars. It was the largest structure ever built by the 3 empires. 4 million beings lived and worked within its massive rings. Diplomats negotiated treaties in its grand halls. Merchants traded goods from 1,000 worlds in its markets. Scientists shared discoveries in its research centers. Ambassador Vortesh of the Vexari Dominion stood at the observation window of his private quarters. He was watching a transport ship dock at the station when his communication device beeped urgently. "Ambassador, we have a situation," said the voice of Station Commander Kelrix. "Please come to the command center immediately." Vortesh had served as ambassador for 60 years. He had seen crises come and go, political disputes, trade conflicts, the occasional border skirmish. Nothing ever truly threatened the peace of Nexus Station. He expected this situation would be no different. He was wrong. The command center was in chaos when he arrived. Officers rushed between consoles. Warning lights flashed on multiple screens. Commander Kelrick stood at the central display, her insectoid body completely still. For it to stop moving meant she was deeply troubled. "What has happened?" Vortesh asked. Kelrix pointed at the main screen. A ship exited faster than light travel at the edge of the system 2 hours ago. It is approaching the station. Vortesh looked at the screen. He saw a vessel unlike anything in his experience. It was shaped like a blade, angular and sharp. Its hull was so black that it seemed to absorb the light around it. Strange structures covered its surface, things that might be weapons or sensors or something else entirely. "Which empire does it belong to?" he asked. "None," Kelrix replied. "We cannot identify it. The design matches nothing in our database. The materials of its hull are unknown. Its energy signature is—" She paused, searching for the right word. "Impossible." Vortesh felt the first cold touch of fear. In all his years, he had never seen an unknown vessel. Every ship in the galaxy was registered. Every design was catalogued. The Triumvirate knew about every spacefaring species within 10,000 light years. "Have you tried to communicate with them?" "We have been sending standard greeting messages for 2 hours. They do not respond." The unknown ship continued its approach. It moved slowly, almost casually, as if it had all the time in the universe. Scans revealed nothing useful. The ship's hull blocked every sensor they had. 3 more hours passed. The ship entered the inner system. It passed defensive platforms without acknowledgement. It ignored warning signals. It simply kept coming, silent and steady, like death itself taking a walk. Then, without warning, the ship stopped. It hung in space just 50 kilometers from Nexus Station. At this distance, its true size became clear. The vessel was massive, easily twice the size of any Triumvirate warship. Every screen in the command center flickered. A voice spoke through the communication system. It used perfect Vexari language, but with an accent no one recognized. "This is the Earth vessel UNAS Remembrance. We request a meeting with the Triumvirate High Council." Silence filled the command center. Vortesh felt his heart stop beating for a moment. Earth, the forbidden word, the buried secret. He had read classified files about Earth decades ago, back when he first gained high-security clearance. He remembered the official story: a primitive species, potential threat, eliminated 300 years ago. But here was a ship, calling itself an Earth vessel. Here was proof that the official story was a lie. Commander Kelrix was the first to recover. "Unknown vessel, please identify yourself further. Earth is not a recognized member of the galactic community." The voice that responded was different, female, human, cold and controlled. "I am Admiral Kira Okonkwo, commanding officer of this vessel. We are aware that Earth is not recognized. That is precisely why we are here." Vortesh stepped forward to the communication console. His training took over, pushing down his fear. "Admiral Okonkwo, I am Ambassador Vortesh of the Vexari Dominion. May I ask the purpose of your visit?" There was a pause. When the Admiral spoke again, her voice carried something that sounded almost like amusement. 300 years ago, your empire sent fleets to destroy my world. You tried to murder every man, woman, and child on our planet. You failed. We are here to discuss that failure." The words hit the command center like physical blows. Several officers turned to look at Vortesh with confusion and horror. Most of them had no idea about the culling missions. That information was restricted to the highest levels. "I am not certain what you are referring to," Vortesh said carefully. "Perhaps there has been some misunderstanding." "There has been no misunderstanding, Ambassador." The Admiral's voice grew harder. "We captured your ships. We read your records. We know about your culling protocol. We know about the 47 species you erased from existence. We know everything." Vortesh closed his eyes. The secret was out. 300 years of lies were about to collapse. "What do you want?" he asked quietly. "A meeting with your High Council, face to face. On this station in neutral territory, we have much to discuss." "And if the Council refuses?" Another pause, longer this time. "Ambassador, I am going to share something with you. A gesture of good faith. Please look at your long-range sensors. Kelrix made an adjustment to the sensor display. For a moment, nothing appeared. Then she made another adjustment, extending the range further than normal. The screen filled with contacts, hundreds of them, ships of the same black design as the Remembrance, arranged in a perfect sphere around the entire system. They had been there the whole time, waiting in the darkness between stars, invisible until they chose to be seen. "We are not here to make requests," Admiral Okonkwo said. "We are here to deliver terms. The High Council will meet with me, or we will make our position clearer. You have 1 day to decide." The communication ended. The unknown ship remained where it was, silent and patient. Vortesh looked at the hundreds of contacts on the screen. He thought about the 3 fleets that had been sent to Earth 3 centuries ago. He thought about how they had never returned. He thought about what kind of species could defeat those fleets, then spend 300 years building this armada in secret. He reached for his personal communicator. His hand was shaking. "Get me the High Council," he said. "Tell them the past has come to collect its debts." The Grand Council chamber of Nexus Station had been designed to impress and intimidate. Its ceiling rose 50 meters high, covered in crystals that projected images of famous triumvirate victories. 3 massive thrones sat on an elevated platform at the far end, each one built to make its occupant appear larger than life. High Sovereign Zyxthar of the Vexari Dominion occupied the left throne. His scales had turned gray with age, but his eyes remained sharp and cruel. He had ordered dozens of culling missions during his long reign. Prime Mind Kelvith of the Kethari swarm sat in the middle throne. Unlike individual Kethari, the Prime Mind was a specially bred being who served as the voice of the entire swarm. When she spoke for trillions. High Resonant Elindra of the Luminara Collective took the right throne. Her crystalline body pulsed with soft blue light. She was considered the wisest of the 3 rulers, though wisdom had never stopped her from approving the extinction of other species. Armed guards lined the walls. Diplomats and advisors filled the observation galleries. Everyone wanted to see the human who had dared to threaten the triumvirate. The chamber doors opened. Admiral Kira Okonkwo walked in alone. She was smaller than the triumvirate leaders had expected. Humans were not physically impressive compared to the larger species of the galaxy. She had dark skin, gray hair cut short, and eyes that seemed to look through everything they saw. She wore a simple black uniform with no decorations except a small pin on her collar showing a blue and green planet. She walked across the chamber floor without hurrying. Her footsteps echoed in the silence. When she reached the center of the room, she stopped and looked up at the 3 thrones. She did not bow, she did not kneel. She simply stood there straight and calm like she was the one sitting in judgment. High Sovereign Zyxthar leaned forward on his throne. "You requested this meeting, human, speak." Admiral Okonkwo smiled slightly. It was not a friendly smile. 300 years ago you sent warships to my world. Your orders were simple: kill everyone, burn our cities, poison our waters, make sure nothing survived. You had done this many times before. You expected easy success. She began to pace slowly, her hands clasped behind her back. Your fleet commander was named Zelvox. He was experienced, confident. He had watched our planet for months before attacking. He saw our wars, our conflicts, our divisions. He concluded that we were primitive and dangerous. He thought we would be easy prey. Zyxthar's claws tightened on his armrest. How do you know that name? Because we captured him. We captured his ship, his records, and his crew. Before he died, he told us everything about the triumvirate, your strengths, your weaknesses, your secrets. She stopped packing and faced the thrones directly. He was very cooperative in the end. Prime Mind Kelvith's antennae twitched. You speak of events 3 centuries past. If your species survived, why reveal yourselves now? Why not attack us while we remained ignorant? The Admiral nodded slowly, as if acknowledging a good question. Because we had a choice to make, and making that choice took time. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small device. The guards raised their weapons, but she ignored them. She pressed a button, and a holographic display appeared in the air before her. "This is human space," she said. The display showed a map of the galaxy. One section was marked in blue. It spread across a vast region of stars on the opposite side of triumvirate territory. 47 star systems, 312 colonies, 19 billion human beings, all built in 300 years. While you forgot about us. The chamber fell completely silent. The triumvirate leaders stared at the map with expressions of disbelief and growing fear. "That is impossible," Zyxthar hissed. "No species could expand so quickly. It took us thousands of years to achieve our territory." Admiral Okonkwo's smile grew wider. "You are correct that it should be impossible, but you gave us something valuable when you attacked our world. You gave us motivation." She manipulated the display. New images appeared. Human shipyards building vessels by the hundreds. Human scientists working with captured alien technology. Human soldiers training in zero gravity. Human children learning about the species that had tried to murder them. For 300 years, every human child has learned about the culling protocol. They learn about the 47 species you erased. They learn that the triumvirate tried to add humanity to that list. This knowledge united us in ways nothing else could. Our old conflicts disappeared. Our divisions healed. We became one people with one purpose. "What purpose?" Elindra asked quietly, her crystal body dimming with concern. "Survival," the Admiral replied. "At first, just survival. We built ships because we needed to defend ourselves. We colonized new worlds because we needed room to grow. We developed weapons because we knew you might return." She paused and looked at each of the 3 rulers in turn. But somewhere along the way, survival stopped being enough. We had built a civilization from nothing. We had turned your attack into our strength. We had become powerful enough to destroy you completely. She let those words hang in the air. Our military analyzed the triumvirate 50 years ago. We concluded that a full-scale war would last approximately 4 years. We would suffer significant losses, perhaps 2 billion dead. But at the end of those 4 years, your empires would no longer exist. Your worlds would burn. Your species would join the 47 you murdered. Zyxthar's scales had turned pale. Kelvith's mind link to the swarm had gone completely still. Elindra's light had faded to almost nothing. "So the question became," Admiral Okonkwo continued, "should we destroy you? We certainly had the right. You tried to exterminate us. You have murdered entire species. No one could blame us for revenge." She took a step closer to the thrones. "We debated this question for decades. Different factions argued different positions. Some wanted blood. They wanted to make you suffer the way you made others suffer. They wanted to erase you from existence, just as you erased the 47. Her voice softened slightly. But other voices spoke differently. They reminded us that we had been the target of extermination. We knew what it felt like to face death simply for existing. Did we want to become the very thing we had survived? Did we want to prove your fears correct by becoming the monsters you believed us to be? She stopped directly in front of the thrones and looked up at the 3 rulers. "I am not here to destroy you. I am here to give you something you never gave the species you murdered. I am here to give you a choice." The display behind her changed one final time. It showed not weapons or fleets or maps of destruction. It showed a simple image, a memorial wall covered with names. "These are the names we know," she said quietly. 47 species, billions of beings who will never exist because you decided they were too dangerous to live. We cannot bring them back. Nothing can undo what you have done." She turned back to face the thrones. "But you can choose what happens next. The killing can end today, Or it can continue, and you can learn what it means to face a species that truly is as dangerous as you feared. The chamber remained silent for a long moment. Finally, high-resonant Elindra spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "What are your terms?" Admiral Okonkwo looked at the three rulers on their thrones. Their earlier arrogance had vanished. They sat like children caught doing something wrong, waiting to hear their punishment. "Before I give you the terms," she said, "I want you to understand something about how we reached this moment." She clasped her hands behind her back and began to speak. "When we captured your first fleet, we found something in the data records, something that changed everything for us. We found the histories of the 47. The holographic display shifted. Images appeared of alien species the Triumvirate had destroyed, beautiful crystalline cities on a world of endless oceans, graceful winged beings flying through purple skis, small furry creatures building their first wooden houses. Each image lasted only a few seconds before fading to the next. Your scouts documented everything before the cullings. They recorded their languages, their art, their music, their stories. They wanted to study the species they were about to murder. Perhaps they thought it was scientific. Perhaps they wanted trophies." She paused as the images continued to flow. "We found a species called the Velthin. They were aquatic beings who lived in the deep oceans of their world. They had just developed their first underwater cities when your fleet arrived. Their entire civilization was destroyed in a single day. But in your records we found recordings of their songs. They sang to each other across the ocean currents. The sounds were—" She stopped for a moment, composing herself. "The sounds were beautiful." High-resonant Elindra lowered her crystalline head. Soft colors of grief pulsed through her body. "We found the Kermathi," the Admiral continued. "They were a species of six-legged mammals who had discovered fire only 2 centuries before you killed them. They had started telling stories to their children about the stars. They wondered if other beings lived out there in the darkness. They hoped to meet them someday." She turned to face High Sovereign Zyxthar directly. "You murdered them before they could find out." Zyxthar said nothing. His yellow eyes refused to meet hers. "When humanity discovered these records, we faced a difficult question. Did we have the right to judge you? We had done terrible things in our own history. We had wars. We had genocides. We were not innocent." She walked slowly in front of the thrones. "But there was a difference. Our crimes were committed against ourselves. When we murdered our own kind. When we conquered our own people. It was horrible, but it was internal, a sickness within our own species." Her voice grew harder. "You murdered others. You reached out into the universe and systematically destroyed entire species because they might become threats. Not because they had attacked you, not because they had harmed you, because they might, someday, possibly be dangerous." She stopped in front of Prime Mind Kelvith. "You killed children who had done nothing wrong. You erased futures that had not yet happened. You played God with the lives of beings who had no way to defend themselves." Kelvith's antennae drooped. The connection to the swarm was flooding her mind with shame and fear from billions of who were watching through her eyes. "So," the Admiral said, stepping back to address all 3 rulers, "we had to decide. What do we do with you?" She paused to let the question hang in the air. "Our military faction wanted war. They argued that the Triumvirate would never truly change. They said you would simply wait until humanity lowered its guard, then try to destroy us again. They wanted to finish this conflict permanently." She raised her hand and made a gesture. Outside the station, the human fleet shifted position. Weapons ports opened along the hulls of 400 warships. Our military had already prepared detailed plans. Every important world in the Triumvirate has been mapped. Every defensive installation has been analyzed. We know where your leaders hide during emergencies. We know where your food supplies come from. We know where your shipyards are located." The 3 rulers sat very still. If I give the order, this station will be destroyed in approximately 40 seconds. Your home worlds will follow within the week. Your species will be scattered and broken within a year. Within a decade, the triumvirate will be nothing but a memory. She lowered her hand. The weapon ports remained open. But the military faction did not win the debate. For the first time, something other than fear appeared in the ruler's eyes. Confusion, hope, disbelief. Another faction emerged, the admiral continued. We called ourselves the Remembrance. We believed that humanity had a chance to be something different, something better than the triumvirate, something better than our own bloody history. She looked at the memorial wall, still displayed behind her. The Remembrance faction argued that destroying you would not bring back the 47. It would not heal the damage you had done. It would only add more death to a galaxy already full of death. Her voice softened slightly. We argued that humanity's greatest strength was not our weapons or our technology. It was our ability to choose. We could choose revenge. We could choose destruction. Or we could choose to break the cycle of violence that had ruled this galaxy for 12,000 years. She faced the thrones again. The vote was close, very close. The Remembrance won by 6%. That margin represents the difference between your survival and your extinction. High Sovereign Zyxthar finally found his voice. What do you want from us? The Admiral took a deep breath. First, the culling protocol ends today, permanently. No more secret exterminations, no more murdered species. Any young civilization that develops in this galaxy will be protected, not destroyed. Zyxthar nodded slowly, agreed. Second, you will release all records of the 47 species you destroyed. Every recording, every document, every piece of art or music or history you saved. These will be shared with the entire galaxy. The universe will know what you did. Prime Mind Kelvith's antennae twitched. Our people will be shamed. Our reputation will be destroyed. Yes, the Admiral said simply, that is the consequence of your actions. Kelvith lowered her head, agreed. Third, you will build memorials on each of your home worlds. These memorials will contain the names and histories of every species you murdered. Your children will learn about them. Your children's children will learn about them. You will never be allowed to forget. High-resonant Elindra's light pulsed with complex colors. We accept this burden. It is just. Fourth, the triumvirate will submit to human oversight for the next 100 years. Our observers will monitor your governments, your military, and your expansion. You will not be allowed to threaten other species during this time. Zyxthar's scales flushed with anger. You ask us to become your subjects. No, the Admiral replied calmly. I ask you to prove that you can change. 100 years is nothing to species as old as yours. Consider it a period of rehabilitation. The three rulers looked at each other. Silent communication passed between them. Finally, Zyxthar turned back to the Admiral. And if we refuse these terms? Admiral Okonkwo's expression did not change. Then the military faction gets their war. And when it is over, there will be no triumvirate left to refuse anything. She gestured at the display, which now showed the 400 human warships surrounding the system. This is not a negotiation, High Sovereign. This is a choice. You can choose to accept consequences for your crimes and continue to exist, or you can choose defiance and join the 47 species you destroyed. She stepped closer to the thrones. We came here hoping you would choose wisely. We came here hoping that the galaxy could heal instead of burn. But make no mistake, if you force our hand, we will not hesitate. We have spent 300 years preparing for this moment. We are ready for either outcome. She stopped directly before Zyxthar and looked up at him. Choose. The chamber was silent. The weight of history pressed down on everyone present. 300 years of secrets, 47 species lost forever, billions of lives that would never be lived. High Sovereign Zyxthar looked at his fellow rulers. He looked at the human ships visible through the observation windows. He looked at the admiral standing before him, small and fragile and utterly unafraid. He thought about the alternative, fire and death and extinction. Then he lowered his head and spoke the words that would reshape the galaxy. "We accept your terms." The galaxy changed faster than anyone expected. News of the human emergence spread within days. Communication networks across triumvirate space carried the story to every world and station. A species thought extinct had returned. The rulers who had dominated the stars for millennia had surrendered without a fight. At first, many species did not believe it. They thought it was propaganda or some kind of elaborate trick. Then the records were released. Every archive the triumvirate had kept was open to the public. Files that had been classified for thousands of years became available to anyone with a computer terminal. The truth about the culling protocol spread like wildfire. Reaction was immediate and intense. On Vexari Prime, the capital world of the Dominion, citizens marched in the streets. Some demanded war against the humans. Others demanded the arrest of their own leaders. Statues of famous fleet commanders were torn down when people learned those commanders had participated in cullings. The Cathari swarm experienced something unprecedented. The mental link that connected all of them carried waves of collective shame. For the first time in their history, individual Cathari began to disagree with the decisions of the whole. Arguments erupted in the hive mind. Some wanted to resist the humans. Others believed their species deserved punishment. The Luminara Collective responded differently. High Resonant Elindri called a gathering of all Luminara on their crystal home world. When they assembled, she did something that had not happened in 10,000 years. She shattered herself. Among the Luminara, self-shattering was the ultimate act of atonement. Elindra's crystalline body broke into 47 pieces, one for each species the triumvirate had murdered. These fragments were distributed to be placed in memorials across the galaxy. Her sacrifice was meant to show that the Luminara accepted responsibility for what they had done. A new High Resonant was chosen. She took the name Elindra Reborn and pledged that her people would spend the next 1,000 years honoring the dead. Construction of memorials began immediately. On each of the 3 triumvirate home worlds, massive structures rose from the ground. These were not monuments to victory or conquest. They were monuments to shame. Each memorial contained holograms of the species that had been destroyed. Visitors could see their faces, hear their languages, experience their art. Signs in 100 languages explained what the triumvirate had done and why. School children were brought to these memorials as part of their education. Teachers explained the history of the cullings. Many children cried when they learned what their ancestors had done. Many asked why no one had stopped it. The teachers had no good answers. Admiral Kira Okonkwo returned to Earth as a hero. Crowds gathered to welcome her ship as it descended through the atmosphere. People waved flags and cheered. News broadcasts carried her image across the planet. But Okonkwo did not feel like a hero. She felt tired. The mission had taken everything she had. Standing before the triumvirate rulers, threatening them with extinction, had been the hardest thing she had ever done. She had meant every word. If they had refused, she would have given the order without hesitation. That willingness to destroy scared her more than anything else. She retired from military service 6 months after her return. She moved to a small house on the coast of what had once been called Kenya. She grew vegetables in her garden. She watched the waves come in. She tried to forget the weight of 400 warships waiting for her command. She did not entirely succeed. Other humans took up the work she had begun. Diplomats traveled to triumvirate worlds to establish embassies. Scientists shared technology and knowledge. Teachers helped develop new education programs that emphasized cooperation instead of conquest. The Galactic Covenant was signed 5 years after the human emergence. This was a new alliance that included not just the 3 original empires, but dozens of smaller species that had lived in fear of the triumvirate for centuries. Humanity was offered the position of leadership in this new organization. They refused. Instead, humans took on a different role. They became arbiters and mediators. When disputes arose between species, human diplomats helped negotiate solutions. When young civilizations were discovered, human ships arrived first to protect them from anyone who might do them harm. The UNAS Remembrance remained in orbit around Nexus Station. It became a symbol, a reminder, a warning. Any species that thought about returning to the old ways of conquest and extermination only had to look up and see that black ship waiting in the darkness. Years passed, then decades. The galaxy slowly healed. On Earth, in the city of Nairobi, a special memorial was built. It was different from the monuments on triumvirate worlds. This one was created by humans for humans. It was a garden filled with trees and flowers from across the planet. In the center stood a wall of black stone. Carved into this stone were names, 47 sections, one for each lost species. The humans had done their best to record every name that could be recovered from triumvirate archives. There were millions of names. Some sections of the wall stretched for hundreds of meters. At the base of the wall, a simple plaque explained the memorial's purpose. They lived, they dreamed, they were murdered, we remember. Children visited this garden on school trips. They walked along the wall, looking at the strange alien names, trying to pronounce them. Teachers explained what had happened to these species. They talked about why remembering was important. One day, a small girl asked her teacher a question that no one had a good answer for. Why did the old empires want to kill everyone who was different from them? The teacher, a woman named Sarah Chen, knelt down to look the girl in the eyes. Because they were afraid, she said. They saw something they did not understand, and instead of trying to learn, they tried to destroy. Fear does that to people sometimes. It makes them do terrible things. The girl thought about this for a moment. But we were different too, she said, and we did not kill them when we could have. Why? Sarah smiled sadly. Because we decided that being strong enough to destroy was not the same as being strong enough to be kind. It takes more courage to offer mercy than revenge. It takes more strength to heal than to hurt. She looked up at the wall of names. We cannot bring these people back. Nothing can undo what was done to them, but we can make sure it never happens again. We can protect the next species that reaches for the stars. We can be the guardians that they never had. The girl nodded slowly, as if understanding something important for the first time. So we remember, she said, so we do not become like them. Yes, Sarah replied, we remember so we do not become like them. In orbit above Earth, the UNAS Remembrance continued its eternal watch. Its crew had changed many times over the years. Generations of sailors had served aboard that ship. Each one understood their duty. The ship was a promise. It promised that humanity would protect the innocent. It promised that the strong would not prey upon the weak. It promised that the cycle of violence that had ruled the galaxy for 12,000 years was finally broken. But it was also a warning. It warned that humanity had not forgotten what had been done to them. It warned that the weapons and the will to use them still existed. It warned that mercy, once rejected, would not be offered again. Far across the galaxy, on dozens of worlds, young civilizations were taking their first steps toward the stars. Some were building their first rockets. Others were just learning to use fire. All of them were watched over by human scouts who made sure no harm came to them. These scouts did not interfere with the young species. They did not share technology or make contact. They simply watched and waited and protected. When the time came for these species to join the galactic community, they would be welcomed rather than destroyed. This was the legacy of the remembrance. This was what humanity had chosen to become. Not conquerors, not destroyers, not rulers. Guardians. The galaxy was finally at peace. And somewhere in that vast darkness between stars, the memory of 47 species lived on in the minds and hearts of a small blue planet that had once been marked for death. They had survived. They had grown strong. And when the moment came to choose between revenge and redemption, they had chosen to be worthy of their survival. That choice made all the difference.